Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, where we look at ourselves and the world through the lens of the 21st century. Hi, and welcome back. I'm your hostess, Cindy Murray, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Amber Garvin and Kristen Murray Hessler. Kristen Murray Hessler.
Call me by my first name.
Well, I do, but then nobody knows what your last name is, so they can't look you up. You know?
Well.
Yeah. Speaking of last names, that kind of segues into our topic that we're talking about, surnames, which we're actually here today to talk to you about ancestry and DNA and a little bit of genealogy and some things like that. That's some topics that Amber and I are very curious about or very interested in, and we've done each of us separately some different kinds of research, and we're going to just kind of talk about those things today. I love talking about family history. I had a great grandmother who was born on the Indian reservation in 1906, before Oklahoma became a state. I believe they became a state in 1908. Is that right? And she actually crossed the Red River into Texas in a covered wagon, and she was alive up until the time that Kristen was born. So I had a lot of very rich stories about her life, and she blessed us with an accounting of her life up until the time that she met her husband, William Nathan Thacker. And she had written out her memoirs, and my grandmother typed them up for us. And it was so fascinating. And I always wanted to know more about her story and about her mother, who was reportedly at least part Native American. There was some confusion about what tribe she belonged to, and among other things. But it was really, really fascinating. And so I started on my genealogical journey many, many years ago. I didn't get really far. This was back in the days when the internet was pretty new, and there was information out there, but it was a little hard to find. So mostly it was still connecting with other people who had records and sharing those records, a lot of that, and then backing it up with copies of documents for proof. So, and it kind of fell by the wayside when I started doing more scrapbooking, because that was something more immediate family history that I could document my own family's history. But I'm still really fascinated with genealogy and family histories. And Amber has a very similar but probably very distinct history with it, because she actually lived in Utah for a time.
Yes.
And you did some research at the Family History Library there. Is that correct?
Yes. My love of genealogy kind of starts with my dad, because back when Ancestry, the website, first came out, my dad got on it, and he would sit for hours at the computer and write down at least like my dad's side family history.
And you're referring to Ancestry.com,
yeah,
right?
Ancestry.com, yes. And so my dad and his first cousin, Bob, also my dad's best friend, but they're also cousins, they would map out the family history. So we have a bunch of documents, and Bob's sister, Lavana, also did the same thing. So we have a bunch of family documents of at least my dad's mom, my granny's family history. Not much was known about my dad's side family history until I started kind of doing the same thing. So yes, I lived in Utah for a while, and before I actually moved out to Utah, I went to visit one summer. And in Salt Lake City, there is the Family History Library. And I really wasn't sure what that was, but I was just walking down the street, and I wandered into it when I was just, exploring downtown Salt Lake City. and everybody was very welcoming. They welcomed me in. Everybody that came to visit the library had to watch like a kind of a genealogy video on the way that you can search for family members and family history online. And I thought that was really neat. So I walked in and, well, I signed up and I walked in and I watched the video with everybody else that had wandered in. And then we were led to computers, and a person that worked there sat with me and got me started in building my family tree.
That's really cool.
Start with yourself, and then, they told me, showed me how to search, and if I didn't know exact dates, what to put. And this was through FamilySearch.org, which is a Utah-based organization, a Mormon-based organization. And so me and somebody that worked there that guided me through it, we sat there for a couple of hours and started my family tree.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just to give a little bit of history, I'm sure most people are probably aware, but just in case they aren't, the Church of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons, they take a very special interest in family histories.
Yes.
It has to do with their religion and accounting. I believe it's accounting for souls.
Yes.
Who have departed and stuff, to make sure that they are accounted for in the hereafter. So
since my ex-husband is Mormon, and I essentially married into that religion, I was able to get an account with them and work on. I have since been locked out of the account that I need to recover it, and work on my family tree through them. But you can, for those that you can go on to FamilySearch.org, and I'm not really sure how limited it is if you haven't, been signed up through the library, but it is another way to build your family tree.
And they have a lot of records, not just for people in the church, but just
but for
in general.
everybody.
They've preserved stuff in general, like census documents and things like that. So it's a very.
They also work with Ancestry.com, and all of those websites really kind of work together.
Right. And I think a lot of them are actually based there in Provo or Salt Lake City or whatever. So, and there's just so much information out there, and I'm not even going to pretend that I can tell you anything about what's available out there, because it's been so long. Like I said, when I first started doing this, there were some, I think Ancestry.com was there, but they were still relying on users to upload data, to transcribe handwritten, photocopied census reports and things like that. So people were still adding information to their database. Obviously, people are still adding stuff to that database, but there was a lot of stuff that was not in there yet at that point in time. And I relied mainly on things like bulletin board services and things like that.
I just wanted to interject that you were talking about Ancestry.com also originated in Utah.
I thought it did. I was pretty sure it did. So, a lot of those come from there, because they have been some of the forerunners in developing the technology to have those interactive genealogical records, the family trees, and things like that. And so, but when I first started, there was some very limited stuff. I was on Usenet, if anybody remembers the Usenet bulletin board news feed services, where you you just post, and it's a text-based server.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we did listserv stuff, and RootsWeb was another one that I used. I'm trying to even think what FamilyTree.com, I think, was one of them. So there was information out there, but you had to really hunt for it. And a lot of times
you still kind of do, but
well, you do.
But there is a lot more out there.
Right.
And I love how the technology has grown since I started doing that. That was back in 2015 when I started that. So that was 7 years ago, just from the time I started. And I actually signed up for Ancestry in about 2020. So 2 years ago. And so I have both websites and both family trees. So 2 years ago, and I recently picked it back up again within the last 6 months or so. And just the technology has changed since 2020. Like, they now have the technology that can scan census records, handwritten records, and come up with people's names.
Right.
Just in a blink. You can barely read it, and
optical
they have
code recognition.
Yeah, and
I was actually just searching on this app because for me, I find it hard not knowing my relatives' exact date of birth or their full name or their maiden names. So I have a little bit of disconnect with some of my relatives on that, and I just kind of will type in their names and scroll through and look. And I was actually just looking at the one you were talking about, Family Tree, and there's photos of tombstones, and it scans the text on the tombstone.
Right.
Yeah, it's
and a lot
cool.
of that tombstone stuff. There was a big Tombstone project. So to date this, you're talking about not that many years ago, that 2015 you started this. I was doing this
so much since.
I was doing this in the 90s, and so you can imagine we're really just getting on the edge of the internet, really. I mean, the internet was there, but it was not what it is today. And so the Tombstone projects, those were people would go get the records from the cemetery and photocopy those and then transcribe that by hand into databases and things. So they would go and count the tombstones and handwrite a database and then come back and type it up into Excel or whatever.
Oh, isn't there a thing, a app you can use to locate tombstones now?
Yeah, it's called Find a Grave or something like that.
Yes. Actually, another fellow genealogist told me about that one. I have not used that myself, but
it connects with Ancestry. Also, okay. Find a Grave.
Yeah, speaking of that person, that genealogist that told me about the Find a Grave, I actually have a very interesting story that goes with that, and it really goes along with what we're talking here too, because I wanted to share it with you, but somehow I'm not sure exactly how we got on the subject one night. I have a Zoom crafting group. We meet by Zoom at least once a week, sometimes an extra time or two a month, just to sit at our house and craft. We started it during COVID when everybody was on lockdown, and we really enjoy crafting together, but it's so much more convenient to stay at our own homes and use our supplies and not be tied down, and if we need to come and go, we can, or whatever. So we just keep it going all day long, and people come and go into this little Zoom group. And this one friend in particular, I've known her for probably 12 or 14 years, maybe, a fellow crafter. And so this friend and I'm not even sure how we got off on this subject, but she knew that I was interested in metaphysical things. And we also had talked, I guess, about family histories or whatever. And so she told me about 2 books. She said, you need to read these 2 books. And one of them was called Psychic Roots by Henry Z. Jones. And the other one is called Voices in Your Blood, Discovering Identity Through Family History by Gigi Vandegrift. And she just recommended these books, and we just continued our talking. But the idea about these books, and I have not read these yet. They are on my wish list to read. But the idea is that our ancestors are out there, and they want us to find them, and that things will happen to make sure that we do. And, like odd coincidences and things, what I often call, some people call serendipity or a coincidence, but I call a synchronicity, because it is something that almost seems predestined, And so we're talking about this, and she said, well, let me look. I just want to look and see, blah, blah, blah. She is from, I believe, Minnesota. Okay. She actually, her family is all from Minnesota, but she was raised in New Mexico, near where I grew up. So she starts looking, and she asks for the name of one of my ancestors, and I give the name of my great-great-grandmother. Her name is Elizabeth Burkett, and she is the woman that we believe to be the full-blooded Choctaw. She was born in Louisiana to somebody, a man named Burkett. I have not found him on any rolls or census to date, and keep in mind that I have not been searching for a long time. And I think we knew her mother's name was Mary, maybe. I know very little about her. But the theory was that she was Choctaw, and she was living as a white woman, to avoid being sent to live on the reservations, as many people were displaced, many of the Native Americans. So I'm always looking for information about her, because I have a cousin who swears he's seen the roll card of one of our other ancestors down her line. So that would indicate that she was indeed Native American, but I have not ever seen this, can't find any record of it anywhere. And my great-grandmother never liked talking about, she admitted to some people that she was part Native American, but that was a hush-hush thing back in the early 1900s. And, even in the mid-century, because there was so much discrimination, and obviously there still is, but this was not something you went about bragging about. That has come about in the later part of the 20th century, where people, come out of the woodwork saying we're all Native American or whatever, and oftentimes we're not. But anyway, I thought, I'm just going to throw that name out there, because that's the name I'm always trying to find a lead on. So I put it in there, and I had been told she died in like South Central Texas sometime, sometime much later, that she went to live with one of her sons and died there. But I hadn't really found any further information. So when my friend pulled up a name that matched hers, she said, well, but she died in Oklahoma. And I was like, well, that could be her, because they may be wrong about where she died. And her daughter lived in Oklahoma. So, because she lived on the reservation. So maybe they did, after her husband died or whatever, they moved to the reservation. So, this is my thought. So she said, give me another name. And so I thought, well, I'll give her a name that's closer to me in family, and that will show if it's the same person, because they would be tied to each other. So I skipped down 2 generations to my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And her name was Minnie Opal Thacker. And my friend pulls this up, and she says, was she married to a Roscoe Carmen Howard? And I said, yes, she was. And she said, oh, yeah, we're related. So this friend that I had known for 12 or 14 years suddenly is like a ninth cousin twice removed or something. I mean, we're talking way far apart. And I'm not even sure about the exact connection because I haven't gone to look at her family tree. But she was related to me. And this is kind of, like I said, I haven't read the Psychic Roots book or whatever, but it's almost like the ancestors were trying to put us together, because she has a lot of family history info and I've barely started, and I have nothing from Roscoe Carmen's side of the family, and he's the one who she's related to. So she's related to my maternal grandfather. So that gives me 2 lines of investigation right there with that one person, because she has a little bit of both of them. And I just felt like this is the voices in my blood, or the psychic roots or whatever, trying to get me this message that you need to connect with this person. And this is not the first time this has happened to me, but it really got me thinking about this whole thing of ancestry. And I'm like, have this renewed interest in digging through that. And I'm so busy. It's so hard, but I really want to do this. And I'm actually thinking about taking a trip to Utah because I really want to go look at the
It's
the
so
records
much fun.
there.
I want to go back. Like, it's really great. Something like not really similar happened to me when I got back into Ancestry. Well, it was actually not last summer, but the summer before. Because I have a couple of cousins, like I said, my dad's first cousin, Bob and Lavana, they also have, they did the AncestryDNA, which I know we'll get into this later because Cindy and I have both done something similar. Well, I've done the AncestryDNA, and Cindy has done 23andMe. And so, my Uncle Kenneth, before he died, also did AncestryDNA, and my cousin Misty, and this is all on my dad's side, did AncestryDNA. And my cousin Lavana contacted me one day, and she said she hadn't been on Ancestry in a while, and she logged into it because I've been talking to her about it because I've been doing it off and on, so we talk about it a lot. And so she logged back into hers, and she saw that she had a new first cousin on her list. And she was like, "Do you know this person?" And I was like, "No, I've never heard of this person in my life." And it turned out that my Uncle Kenneth, when he was like about 17 or 18, had a girlfriend that got pregnant, and she didn't tell him that she was pregnant. And shortly after that, he went off to the military. He went overseas, and they broke up, and she chose to have the baby and put that baby up for adoption. And this woman, who's around my parents' age now, because my dad is like 17, 18 years younger than my Uncle Kenneth, she had her AncestryDNA done. She was adopted, and it showed 100% or whatever match with my Uncle Kenneth, like a probable father. And so she didn't realize that my Uncle Kenneth had died, of course, and she was trying to get a hold of people. So she was trying to get a hold of my cousin Lavana because it said first cousin. And I thought that was just very interesting. So this would be, my first cousin, my dad's niece, who happened to be the same age. And so of my dad's siblings, only one is still living. So my cousin Lavana got her in touch with my Uncle Sammy. So I thought that was very cool that my uncle had a long lost child that nobody knew about through AncestryDNA.
This is not a unique story either. I know a lot of adopted people. I have a lot of friends who were adopted, and they actually found their birth parents through using these genealogical things, because back in the days when they were adopted, adoptions were always closed. You never knew the identity of the parents. You could not find the identity of the parents, and the parents could not go back and find the identity of the child. And so I've known several people who actually found that through Ancestry or 23andMe DNA or whatever, and have connected with their families and have started relationships with them. And they say it's life-changing to know, to find who you belong to, actually. And it does not take away from the gift of having their adopted parents. They love their adopted parents.
No.
And they know that was a gift that was given to them, and to be able to have that, but to be able to go back and find those birth parents and just to see the similarities in DNA. This is where my blonde hair comes from. This is where I get my blue eyes. This is where I get my fiery temper. Things like that it's very cool. There's also some downsides to it. My husband had a person who he worked with, and he or one of his siblings, I'm not sure which one, did one of the DNA tests, and they found that there was a sibling out there that they did not know about, a girl. And as it turned out, the father had an affair, and the woman gave birth to a daughter. And the siblings were excited to meet this person, because this is a connection to their father. And she was excited to meet them. But their mother was very upset about it.
Oh, I can imagine. I guess she didn't know about it?
Apparently not. And she basically, either that, or I'm not sure if she knew about it, actually. But I could see, either way, even if she did, then this child is a constant reminder that someone she loved and trusted betrayed her. But she basically told her children that if you have a relationship with this girl, you will not have a relationship with me. Now, I do not agree with that stance. I understand her not wanting to have a relationship with that girl, but at the same time, I can't imagine ever putting my children in that situation. But it has happened.
Yeah,
it's not uncommon. So they actually continued their relationship, and as far as I know, they worked it out with mom later. She was hurt, but she's a grown woman.
Yeah,
she'll get over it. She's your mama. She's always going to love you. So, and if she doesn't, then there's something wrong there.
Yeah.
But anyway, like I say, there's good things about it and there's bad things about it. But I just think it's really fascinating to open up that whole new world of exploration. And that was one of the reasons that I did my initial test with 23andMe. But I also did it because they did genetic testing on common cancers and diseases and things like that. And it was much, much cheaper than getting a DNA test from my doctor's office. So at the time that I did my 23andMe, I had fairly recently been diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked my doctor about doing genetic testing because I was concerned for my children, and I did not, I wanted to know what caused my breast cancer. And I was basically told that my insurance wouldn't pay for it unless I had a very, very strong family history of breast cancer in my family. And this was really weird to me because I felt like I sort of did have a connection to breast cancer in my family. I had my mother's father, his family has a very strong history of having various kinds of cancer. There were 3 or 4 of them that had leukemia, and at least 3 of the sisters had breast cancer, and there were some incidents of ovarian cancer as well. So, which are tied to the BRCA gene. And so that to me, because it was my mother's sibling or my mother's aunts, that to me I felt like I had a family history there, but that still wasn't enough because my mother and her sister had not had breast cancer, but they were still relatively young, and there's only 2 of them. So the odds, my grandfather had like 7 or 8 siblings, and then he only had 2 children. So it's, the fact that my sister died before she developed breast cancer, but she died at 50 years old. So, these things, the rules from the insurance just really frustrated me because I felt like there was this strong family history, but they didn't think so because these people that were closely related to me had already died younger without having developed the disease. So I wanted to know the answers, and I was not willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars to do genetic testing out of pocket. And so, which is what they were going to charge. And so I opted for the 23andMe because I knew that they tested for the BRCA gene. And I was very fortunate. It showed that the most common BRCA mutation I did not have. So that was a real relieving revelation. So, but I also wanted to know more about this great-great-great-grandmother who was supposedly Choctaw, and to see if I got any of those genes, because that would, if I had those genes, then that would be the proof that she was. Because we've had cousins who did the testing, and it showed that they had no Choctaw DNA. So some of the family who were part of that said, well, they don't have the DNA, so she must not have been. There is no Indian, Native American,
That's not necessarily true.
Exactly. And that was one of my points, is because you only get half of your genes from each parent. And so if my mother gives me half of her genes, but she doesn't give me the half that has Native American DNA in it, then I'm not going to have Native American DNA. And we are talking about 4 generations. Is that right? Great-grandmother, well, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother.
So I guess
5 generations. 5 generations of women, and the genes are split in half. By the time it gets to me, it is very probable that there is no Native American DNA in there unless they were marrying into another family that had that gene. So
okay, so I have like something funny to say, and I believe we were talking about this the other day, but so I recently just got my results back last week from the AncestryDNA, and on my both of my I guess I have 4 great grandmother, or wait, yeah, 2 of my great grandmothers were Cherokee, full blood Cherokee, one on the reservation, and then the other was adopted out, so we don't know anything about her, like forced adoption. And so on my DNA results, I am 100% white, like European,
Oh, yeah.
And so as passed down from both sides of my family, I would theoretically be 1/8.
Right. But that's not the way that genes work.
Yeah.
You don't get an 1/8 of all the genes or a 1/4 of all the genes or a 1/2 of all the genes. You take the genes and go, one goes here, one goes there, one goes here, one goes there. It's really weird.
Genes
and dominant genes override things. And then, you can pass on, obviously, recessive genes. But the fact is that if you have a parent who has a blue eye and a green eye, and the other parent has 2 blue eyes, and both parents pass down the blue eye gene, you are not going to have green eyes.
Yeah.
You are not going to have a gene for green eyes. And so
then
you're not going to have children who have green eyes. So that's kind of where I'm going.
But that doesn't make you any less Choctaw, you know what I mean? That doesn't make me any less Cherokee just
because what they're looking for is specific markers. They're not taking all of these genes and saying, well, this is a Cherokee gene and this is a Choctaw gene or whatever. Yeah. They are comparing your DNA to someone who is reportedly Cherokee or Choctaw or whatever, and the genes that show up in common become a marker for that trait. So that's how they determine that that's where you come from. And the more people who have their ancestry tested, their DNA tested, and the more people they add into their database, then the more markers that they can pinpoint. So there may be 1 or 2 markers that mark Cherokee. Yeah. Versus
I don't even think it goes specific as that, at least not on Ancestry. It just goes indigenous American.
Right. So there's only a few markers that they're looking at. It doesn't mean that the other genes that you have aren't also indigenous American genes. Well, it just means that they aren't the ones that typically mark this genealogy. So that is kind of a misconception that a lot of people have. And so I encourage people to go have that testing done, because the more people that get that testing done, the more fleshed out the genome becomes, the research, and then the easier it will be to detect. Now, here's another thing about that. Amber mentioned that she did it on Ancestry.com. I did mine on 23andMe. They do not share data.
Yeah, no, they don't.
That is not.
Those two.
So if you want it on both, you have to take both tests. So that, there may be Choctaw data of a relative of mine on the AncestryDNA that matches my DNA, but I'm not on AncestryDNA, so I can't match it.
Well, so I did find, even though I don't have any indigenous American DNA, I did find something that I didn't know was that I am, over half indigenous Scottish.
Okay.
So I had always thought that my family was Irish. And that is what I had always heard. But as I have been doing my family tree, I knew that my family originally came from Scotland. When in 2015, when I started doing my family tree, I found out that my family actually came from Scotland, and they were only in Ireland. They went from Scotland to Ireland, and they were only there a really short amount of time, like maybe 10, 15 years, and then immigrated to America.
Okay.
So instead of Irish, I am actually, like, in the roots, Scottish.
Wow. So this is, I had no surprises there. When I did mine, I wound up being 81.3% British and Irish. My dad's surname, my birth surname, is O'Neill. doesn't get much more Irish than that. And I actually, the testing shows that I have a great deal of origin in the county of Dublin. So, but there was also some other things that that interested me in my search. So, and I will kind of go through these just very quickly as I pull them up. There is a lot of other European, Eastern European, Southern European, Greek, Balkan, French,
England,
German. Yes. So, and that's not surprising because Europe is not all that large and people moved around a lot sometimes. People intermarried into other countries. There were a lot of arranged marriages, particularly with like royalty. Not saying that I'm royal, but you know, the Romans came up through all of Europe, you know, and there's a lot of cross culturalism, cross genetics there.
Well, yeah, so, the birth of the English language.
Yes. So there's a whole lot of things there. So, and then you get into, I am 1.5%, sub-Saharan African. And I thought that was very interesting. And this brings me up into the question about my Native American, grandmother, because sub-Saharan African, this is Congolese, and southern East Africa, West Africa, Guinea. I can't even say words right now. But anyway, I have a quite a bit. You know, like I say, it's 1.4%. It's not very much, but for it to trickle down in there tells me that there was probably someone, a person of color in my ancestry. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing that is also interesting, because when you're looking at a woman's genealogy or a woman's DNA, we are looking at the tracing back the, is it mitochondrial DNA? I'm not sure exactly, but it's only from the woman's side of the family, woman to woman to woman. So all the way back through all of the females. So if I have 1.4% of sub-Saharan African, that means some female in my line of direct descent was sub-Saharan African. And that leads me, and this leads me back to this grandmother, mm-hmm. that my great-great-great-grandmother, who was in Mississippi and reportedly living as a white woman, and I'm using air quotes with that. Perhaps she wasn't Native American. Perhaps she was black. Or, of mixed race, because, yeah. I mean, this is Louisiana, mm-hmm. and it was not uncommon, for blacks to intermarry, or
lots of,
and there's a lot of mixed race. Yes.
Louisiana, especially whenever America.
Well, and there were, and I don't like using the term, but the term that they used then were mulatto, quadroons, terrible words, but yeah. But we're talking about they would live in high society often. They were celebrated belles of the ball. They were kind of exotic looking and beautiful, and albeit lesser citizens than the white people, as the way they were treated. But they also were part of society there, and so that was not uncommon to have them interacting with high society, going to balls and things like that. So it would not be unheard of for someone of that racial makeup to be living in northern Louisiana and then marry a white man.
Well, see, mine is like definitely. I don't have anything like that in mind. Like mine is England and northwestern Europe, and Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and then 5% Germanic Europe.
Okay.
And then Sweden and Denmark and Norway. So I didn't even know that at all. So maybe I have Viking ancestors.
That's interesting. I actually have 0.4% Filipino and Austronesian, which I thought that was a little bit interesting as well, because I have no idea how that could have gotten, how that DNA could have gotten in, there's not any traceable that I know of roots for someone of that ancestry to come to North America, except maybe through the trades, somebody, a trader, a sailor or something, or also, the very long stretch here, maybe, when the Native Americans, ancient Native Americans crossed the Bering Strait, maybe that DNA is the same DNA as the people who wound up in the Philippines. Some went north and crossed the Bering Strait, and some went south and wound up in Austronesia, Philippines, whatever. And so that DNA has, is matched. So I it's very interesting to me, and that one is very trace. It's less than a percent, but it's still, I don't know. It's just fascinating to me that it shows that much detail, and I'm curious to figure out how that fits into who I am. So. Or who my ancestors were. So that's a good thing. I really find it fascinating, and I hope more people will do those testing and get us to the point where we can compare those things. And there is some different ways. Like I said, you can go take the test on Ancestry.com and the 23andMe and compare them. And I think there's another test too. I'm not sure who it is, but I remember that there's another one. But another thing that you can do also is there's a website called GEDMatch, GEDmatch. And you can upload your reports from Ancestry.com and from 23andMe, and they compile them into one large database. So you can share your DNA with anyone from Ancestry.com who has also uploaded their DNA. So I think that's kind of a cool thing. I have not done it yet. Like I said, all of this stuff has kind of made me more interested in this, and maybe if I can catch a break, I will have some time to put into it a little bit more. Now, Kristen, you ordered the test, right?
Yeah, I'm super lame. So I opened the box and I was like really excited when I got it. I actually ordered mine this summer. And I wanted to make like a little video of me doing it and probably write a blog about it. I've been really busy, and I know all you have to do is like spit in a little tube and send it off. It's super easy, but it's also a lot. I kind of like been sitting in the sidelines letting you guys talk because you both have like full records of both of your parents. My perspective is almost similar to like the adopted people in a way, just a small little taste of that in my family history, because my biological father, his mother and father separated, when he was very small, and he was not very close with his biological father, and me the same. Like, I've spent time with that part of my family, but like, there's a lot of people that have had name changes from divorces and things like that. Like, I literally could not tell you what my cousin's maiden name is. And so I'm like hesitant to add them to my family tree because I don't even know what name to put down for some of them, or how to spell it, or where they're born, where they're from, when their birthday is.
Once you, and
I know, I'm excited because I'll spit in that tube and it'll do it for me. Like,
yeah, they're like,
really,
once you start building it, it'll say potential match, and then you go and review it. If you just know around
enough
birth dates, then you'll be able to find it.
Funny thing is, actually, you guys are probably like, oh my God, she's looking at her phone this whole time, but I've been actually building my family tree because you said one of our distant relatives' names, and I was like, oh, that's right, that's her middle name, not her first name, and that was the missing link on my tree. And then boom, all of a sudden, like, a whole bunch of my ancestors, you know, and I'm talking only like a few generations back, but I was missing someone's name. And I think for me, one of my experiences also is a little bit on the outside looking in. On my mom's side of the family, everyone is into the ancestry and genealogy.
Relatively,
on the females. So my aunt and my mom like coveted my great grandmother's stash of things like the memoirs, and you guys were just like, I can't wait to get my hands on that, and she would not like let go of it. And her daughter, and my mom's aunt also,
who has not done any pursuit of any genealogy.
I found her. She's been adding stuff
she?
online. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that must have changed
it's
then.
One of those things where, like, there's only so many of those paper records, and you have to have a responsible family member that has them and is uploading these documents. Because
I think you should share. I really do.
Right. And that's where I was about to say is, like, my mom probably would let me thumb through the books and the documents, but probably like monitored. You would probably want to be standing over me, making sure I didn't mix them up and stuff like that. And my aunt actually, one year for Christmas, she made her own a little album kind of thing that she put some photos together and put everybody's names and birthdays, and I was like really thankful for that, because that was the first thing I had of my own of my ancestors. And that's where I want to come from this. You guys have really talked about like the DNA part of it, and like research and, developing better systems for staying connected with people and finding ways to live our lives better, ultimately, like for medical reasons and things like that. But I also like the idea of just being more connected.
Oh, yeah.
Technology in the past, 20 years has taken us leaps and bounds with connection. I actually, like, that grandfather that I don't really know, he's on Facebook, and I could just be like, hey, tell me about you, it's kind of scary though. That's like one of the things I want to work on with myself is, just branching out and connecting with those people. Because your cousin who, was long lost, removed from the family, for adoption, like, she has, an immense amount of braveness that, like, I can't even just fathom.
Right.
Like those people that just reach out like, hey, I'm related to you. Tell me about you. Like, to me, like, wow, that's something, like, I can't even do that to my own family that I know.
Well, and here's another thing, like we were talking about, that there are still people out there looking for those relatives. Mm-hmm. I have a close family member of my husband who served in Vietnam, and he had a child there out of wedlock, and he came back. He tried to I don't really know the whole story, but apparently he tried to get the child and the mother moved to the United States after the war, or when he was released from his service, and he was not able to do so. And he lost track of this child. And when he passed away, his son here in the States tried to make a connection and was shut down every step of the way by other family members who discouraged him from finding that, because they had encouraged his father to just let it go and let it be. And it's truly a sad story. And this person may have a great life there, who knows, but he may never know who she is without doing the DNA, and that's still not.
It's only
if she
halfway.
did as well.
The other person has to do it. Yeah.
And there's a lot of that there. There are people who are still searching for that connection, and I agree with you. I think it's a lot about finding those connections. I have a cousin. She is many, 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 many times removed. Probably, maybe not as far back as the friend who told me about the Psychic Roots book, but she's pretty far back. And we actually met online while I was doing genealogy. I think she had been doing some at the same time. And we've been corresponding with each other for years now. And she's corresponded with other members of my family. She had met my grandmother at some point in time. Her mother, I think, is a cousin of my grandmother. So, yes, I think that's what it is. And so there's a whole branch of that family over there that I've, friends with on Facebook. We send emails and long letters, and Christmas cards and things like that back and forth. And it's interesting to me to have those connections. So, it's like having a pen pal, but they're your cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to find that hidden past of mine. Yeah. And I want to archive it. So that's kind of one of my things. Like, I love all the digital stuff that everybody has going on, but with scrapbooking and stuff, like, I feel like I need to publish, and I say that with air quotes because when I mean publish, I just mean like creating something of my own.
Right.
And just having like a profile page of each one of my family members, and then, just...
Which is what I have, yeah.
Yeah, and then just kind of documenting or taking what I have of documents. I have, like, for Raina, for example, her mother has passed away. We have her, birth certificate and stuff like that. I want to have something for her. I would love to be able to, find her family roots also and create a tree for her, because, her family that I know of is really small. I just know a couple of her family members.
Well, and the genetic parts of her family may be important someday as well, because, that not having her mother, she only has an aunt and some half siblings, and
she has 2 aunts and some half siblings.
Yeah. And, so, having those family history, and the DNA could be very relevant to her at some point in her future.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how humanity is, because we do, like, take pictures and things like that, but it's funny how we can forget so easily something from recent generations past. I always wonder, like, how do we have these, lost cities? There are so many of them on our planet, and so many times, like, archaeologists are finding a new site where there's, like, rich wealth of history to be found. And it's like, how is that stuff just, like, forgotten? But it literally is, like,
in the United States, even.
Right. Oh, yeah, just in the United States.
Ghost towns. There's lots of ghost towns.
Yes. And I'm just like, how is it that we can forget over, like, it takes just 4 generations? Because there's where you have a disconnect where someone did not meet one of their ancestors because one of them is deceased before the other one was born.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it takes for you to completely forget a
Well,
whole history's past.
And that gap is getting larger.
It really is,
the generation, because people are waiting.
Rates.
The birth rates are slowing, and people are waiting longer to have children. So, many times there's kids who never know their grandparents, much less their great-grandparents.
Their great-grandparents,
Yeah.
Even if I don't have kids, I want to do this for me. Like, it was something that my dad started for me whenever he started doing this. And I want to continue that for the memory of my dad. And I know it's going to be difficult when I get to my mom's side because, my grandmother has dementia, so she cannot tell me any of these things. And I was just thinking the other day that I know that my parents had a song. Well, I'm getting married soon, so in the next year. So Jason and I were talking about, our songs and stuff like that. And I know my parents had a song, but I can't remember what it is. And, they're not alive to tell me. So it's important that I do these things now and write down our family history now, because one day I'm going to forget. One day I'm going to get too old and forget. And maybe this might benefit my cousin's children or something like that if I don't have children of my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good thing, I think. I really do. It's interesting. It's fascinating. There's obviously a lot more to talk about on it.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
We may have to come back to this topic later after
when
Chris
I actually get my results back.
Maybe like
and maybe we'll find out that Amber and I are related. Who knows?
That was
happened before. So.
That was one thing I was hoping to find some kind of weird discovery like you did. But, I have all this list of, and I'm still, since I just got my results, I have to answer a bunch of questions and everything like that.
Well, like I
so
say,
I still have
family
potential
tree is not there, so
yeah.
And
Who
I
knows?
need to add it to the
Who knows?
GEDMatch,
You and I might be related because I still have a whole side of my family that I don't know.
Well, and here's another
true.
story along those lines. Back when I was doing all this paper genealogy stuff, I was in the habit of anytime I ran across a surname that I recognized, I would always ask, "Are you related to so and so?" Because that's often how you find those relatives and stuff. And there was a kind of unique. I was on one of my Daniel, Daniell. That's one of my surnames that I researched, and I was looking for some records, and there was a man on there who was also researching that same family line, and his last name was Boatman, Boatman. And I was like, I've only known two other Boatmans in my, and I live in a big city, so I've only seen that name twice out of all these people, And one of them was my husband's, well, technically three times, my husband's best friend in high school and his brother. That was two of them. And my son's dentist when he was about 4 years old. And I asked her about it, and she was like, well, I don't know. That was my husband's surname. So she could be related. I don't know. But those were the only people I ever knew with that last name. And so I asked him, are you related to my husband's friend, Guy Boatman, who has since passed, sadly. But he said, oh, yeah. He's my son. and this man is actually a cousin of mine many times back down through the line, but he actually is the father of one of my husband's best friends in high school. And who would have ever figured, like I said, those psychic roots, I got to read that book. So maybe we'll come back after I read the book and we'll talk about it some more. Hopefully Kristen will have her DNA testing done and maybe some of her family's names and information in her family tree. Maybe I'll have my family tree updated and we can talk about it a lot more. But for this week, I think that is where we need to call it. So next week, we are, Amber is going to be our hostess. So what are we talking about, Amber?
Oh, we're talking about therapy and self-care techniques. So, guys, come thinking about what you do for self-care.
That's important.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking for some new ideas because
totally.
Yes, very much so. So I want to give a shout out to Red Door Studios and Creative Audio Tech for our equipment and for our lovely soundtrack that you hear at the beginning and end of all of our episodes. And if you are a follower, please, please, please share the links to this podcast with your friends and go give us some good ratings so that we can bring more people in to hear this.
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Yes, and comment on our blogs. Go look at the blogs. You're only getting part of the story if you're not reading the blogs, because each of us posts another blog every week. And so there's 3 new blogs that continue this conversation. And we also have a Facebook chat group set up where you can post whatever you want. You can ask questions. You can comment on the podcast. You can bring up topics that we've talked about in the past. And it's a great place to carry the conversation on. So go over there, sign in, and join us there because we'd love to hear what you think. And that's it for this week. And we will be back next week with self-care. All right. That's it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.